You're listening to Kizuki, the podcast. I'm Mae Yoshikawa, and I define the Japanese concept of Kizuki as the following. Kizuki 1. A moment of epiphany, an aha of realization or insight which opens the knower to a new dimension of truth that was formerly unknown. 2. Steps in an incremental growth of awareness, resulting in a movement from ignorance to greater awareness of the bigger picture. A kind of knowing that cannot be undone, that cannot be unrealized. As a longtime yoga and meditation practitioner, a world traveler and curious self-explorer, I'm obsessed with Kizukis. Listen on each week for inspiring and enlightening stories that may just tip you over for your next aha. This week's episode is the second of 2 episodes welcoming our guest. It's called Overthinking and Resilience with Jesse McCrindle. Welcome back, listeners. I am sitting here again with my nephew, Jesse. Today, it is my joy to welcome you. Hi, Jess.
Hello.
What's going on?
Nice to be back.
All right. Well, I just really enjoyed our conversation last week about the Kizuki, the big aha that you had in your young life and how it's really shifted the trajectory of your studies and the way that you approach life. And now, having studied neuroscience, you have so much to offer to help us to understand some of the workings of our mind and mindset. So I want to just dive into our conversation again today and ask you, what's another Kizuki that you think has been really definitive in your life?
That's a good one, because I had several big ones I wanted to talk to. But a big one that's quite personal to me, but I think some people would be able to relate to it, is that since my first Kizuki around the importance of importance of your thinking in shaping your experience in life, since then I have been very inquisitive and very curious about thinking, and I think it sort of shaped me into someone who thinks a lot, and I would say can be overthinking. And typically I've gotten very good at not having very negative overthinking patterns. Typically when someone says they're overthinking, it's like in a social situation or like one of those kinds of examples where it's like, oh, did I sound stupid? I don't really mean like that. I mean more like I like to chase my thoughts down like rabbit holes. And sometimes it can be unhelpful. And I like to really challenge my beliefs. Like, why do I think that way? Is that true? And how else could you think about it? And what does this mean about you? And those kinds of self-inquiring questions, I love them. But in a recent experience where I had a breakup, and then I had my mom's financial situation became like a crisis, and I had to fly to Japan to take care of her. And that, again, that combo, that 1-2 of those two difficult things within like a week or two apart, really rocked me. And I was in a place of feeling, I was in Australia at the time and my mom was in Japan, and I felt very disconnected from her, but also from all my friends that were, present with me, but I didn't feel connected. And I suddenly felt like I was really lonely. And I thought, man, this is quite scary. Am I going to feel like this for a while? And I thought, I did that whole path of, okay, why do I feel that way? And I thought, probably because, I went really deep with it, and it didn't get me out of the hole. And I just thought, man, like, am I going to be like this forever now? And I got really fearful of that potential future. And I thought, yeah, this is where that, over inquisitive, like self challenging habit can be toxic, perhaps. And then eventually, you hear that advice of someone says like, yeah, it's okay to feel that way, or, it's natural, you feel that way, and you hear it a lot. And so I would say I know it, but I didn't realize it. And that's the difference, right, between the Kizuki and knowing something. Because one day I realized it and I thought, oh, why do I have to keep asking myself why I feel this way, and should I feel this way, or how long? It's actually, it makes sense. I feel this way. Like, I'm going through a breakup and mom's going through a hard time. So naturally, I'm going to have all sorts of feelings, and I don't have to spend my time thinking about why or how long. It's just what it is. And that's all you should focus on. And so when I had that realization, it took away a huge chunk of my worry, which was related to the future, or a possible future scenario where I was going to feel like this forever.
Wait, I want to kind of pin that.
Yeah.
Can you try to reiterate what exactly it is that you realized in that moment?
That sometimes you feel the way you do, and you don't, the reason is obvious, and there doesn't have to be like an underlying reason. Because I love looking for those deep reasons, but actually, something bad happened and you feel bad, and sometimes that's it, and you don't have to challenge that.
I was just like kind of nudging you to say it and then hear yourself say it again, because what you're saying is you realize that it is what it is.
Yeah,
period.
It is what it is. Yeah.
Right? And it's just really interesting because on one level, someone might hear a conversation and just be like, dude, duh, of course it is what it is. What are you even talking about? Did you really study neuroscience? But on the other hand, I think what you're talking to is on a little bit more of a deeper level, because in order for you to come to that realization, you did a whole journey of, well, am I feeling this for these reasons? Can I approach it a different way? You did like a full 360 travel through, and then full circle you come back to, maybe it just is what it is.
Yeah.
And it can be as soft and simple as that, except you've done the whole journey. Let me give you an example. This is, I think it was like a U.S. American author. I wish I could remember who it was, but it's like when you are leaving for a journey, right? Let's say you get to travel the whole world. Where's your final destination?
Like where you started, right?
Which is your...
Now, here?
Your home.
Oh, your home, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if you think about, if you know that your final destination is your home, do you not do the traveling? No, right? It's not how it works. You are still going to move towards your final destination, but it's still worth it to do the traveling, to experience what you're going to experience, to eat the foods, to meet the people, to think the thoughts, to expose yourself. And then you come back home, and then maybe you realize for the first time, oh, my house smells this way.
Yeah.
Or, oh, my house feels different. Or, oh, I didn't realize my house was so bright or so comfortable, or whatever it is, you realize it.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same way with realizing, oh, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's one thing on a more superficial level to just be like, oh yeah, it is what it is. It's a whole other thing to have traveled the however many years or hours or weeks or that whole experience to come back and say,
yeah,
it is what it is.
It's like when you've told me this recently, of like something along the lines of like, don't overthink it. And and it's funny because I talk about this with my friends sometimes where, so I would say I think a lot, and oftentimes, I come to the same conclusion as someone who didn't really think about it. Like, oh, we both agree that's the best way to do it. And I think, therefore I sometimes devalue that process, but actually the person who never overthinks is not doing the same thing as someone who is capable and has experienced thinking through everything and then coming back to that conclusion is actually totally different. You're operating on like a totally different understanding.
It's qualitatively different.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But not quantitatively different.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, I would even say to be able to appreciate both approaches, it just gives a whole different depth and appreciation for the variety of approaches that anyone can take in any moment, in any way.
Yeah.
And everyone is free to do so. But what do you choose? And I think that's, now I'm talking personally about myself, because I've been told by many people multiple times that, I guess the thing that I get most is I'm a deep thinker, but I reckon it hasn't always been used as a compliment to me. Sometimes in Japanese, they might say like, omotai, like it's heavy. Too heavy. Yeah, it's too heavy. Oh, you're that type.
It's tiring for many people.
Or it's boring, or people tend to want to avoid it or run away from it.
Totally.
And in my case, I have had men tell me, whether they were, not like less, partnership type of relationships, but men in business or at conference tables, or, in a more kind of work-related context. And again, it wasn't necessarily as a compliment. I think it was meant to, if anything, kind of put me down. And I used to take offense with that. Like, it hurt me.
Yeah.
Because I thought that it was a positive thing, that it made an experience richer, that it made my opinions or my insight with more depth, And when that wasn't appreciated, it stung. But I realized, this is one of my kizukis, I guess, and it took me years, but I realized that was essentially only a reflection of perhaps I didn't appreciate their lightness.
Yeah, you could see it like that.
Because, I wholly believe that my unrealized or kizukarete inai, non-kizuki kind of ideas are what, like you said in the earlier episode, paints the colors of my own lens, right? So what I'm saying, and I'll try to say this in a more somewhat eloquent way, but what I'm saying is that my tendency towards thinking things through deeply and thinking through like every nook and cranny and being this deep present person perhaps came at the price of having somewhat of a judgment towards other people who, I came to the same conclusion. I didn't have to think about it. Because I'm thinking, but this is qualitatively different. And perhaps if unknowingly I have that slight judgment, then I'm the one who's going to be offended when they look at me and go, that's too deep. You're way overthinking this. And it creates a separation, But somehow, I don't know, and I gotta admit, I was definitely hurt more than once. And I think this one was, for me, a much more gradual kind of kizuki and an undoing. But I realized that, oh no, their way of life is awesome too.
Yeah.
They don't even need to think or, to come to the same
Ignorance
conclusion.
is bliss.
Yeah. And that I would have no reason, not even in any little teeny tiny way, to look down upon it in my heart. And somehow then the sense of separation vanished. So not that it doesn't, it doesn't sting anymore if someone ever said anything like that to me. It doesn't matter because I appreciate my stance anyway, as I appreciate theirs.
Yeah, I appreciate this trait in myself for sure. And I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Like it's mostly good. It mostly enriches things. It mostly makes you more interested in things, and therefore you learn more and all of that. But then you can have those more negative spirals as well. And I definitely think it's funny because I don't think I've had that experience where talking to people and I want to go a little bit deeper, but I feel like, they're not interested. I've had that experience many times, and that's fine because I think it is more of a, weird or more rare to be that kind of person to want to have those kinds of discussions. And that's just what it is. It's not good or bad, but it does just mean that most people probably are going to be like, come on, man, I'm just trying to chill out, and that's just what it is.
Yeah. No, I think what we are talking about is there such a thing as over-awareness? Overthinking, there definitely is.
I'm inclined to say yes, but I don't know.
Right. No, it's perhaps a rhetorical question, but it's interesting to consider for someone. I might even say one of my students a couple of years ago, because I'm always teaching and sharing mindfulness and meditation and kizuki and stuff. One of my students said to me in Japanese, 私、気づき中毒だと思います.
Addicted?
Right. I think I'm addicted to I want the next kizuki, the next kizuki, the next kizuki. And I thought, wow, that was a really kind of interesting way to put it. Or kizuki otaku or something like that. I'm a geek.
It is addicting though.
In a sense, yes, because it's expansive.
Yeah.
It expands your consciousness.
Well, and neurologically, you have the dopamine. It's totally addictive because kizuki gives you that neurochemical boost that makes you want to do the behavior. The stronger the insight is, the more you're chemically motivated to do something about it.
Yeah, so to the extent that the insight is an expansiveness, an expansion of consciousness, wouldn't you say that's the force of evolution?
Yeah, I don't know. The force of nature, evolution. I think the force, well, maybe it's different for people, because I think the force of nature within me is heavy on that learning side. I love that expansion. I love learning. And when I really think about what I'm interested in and things that excite me and what feels the most natural, what pulls me in the most, it centers around that for me. But I don't know what it's like for others. It would be it would be a bit unfair, and that bias of thinking that your way of seeing reality is the objective way of seeing reality. But
yeah, I think that's definitely a trap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe if there were no recordings of this conversation, I would say that everyone is like that. And everyone does have that inherent desire to learn and to expand. And there's just all these barriers that are in between them and the expression of that force of nature, And then breaking those down would lead to you expressing that. And it would be different flavors for people, but it would be that thing of learning and I don't know, nature. I definitely think it's a force of nature.
Yeah.
But off record.
There's another teeny tiny piece I want to nitpick a little bit there where you said, well, if someone doesn't have that qualitative, whole journey approach to come back to the same conclusion and they just hop into it and arrive at it, you kind of whispered, ignorance is bliss, which I used to think, and I'm not sure I think that anymore. I might use the word, tricky. Words are tricky. But the word that definitely came to mind for me was innocence.
Right.
There's no, well, clearly there's no harm intended, but there's also no like overthinking, like over analyzing. You know, there's almost like a childlike approach to it. And innocence, I is a topic that I'm very curious about lately, because we lose it. We lose it very quickly. And especially in this overanalyzing, overthinking, like, you know, beating the topic into the ground because you need to know everything about it. And somehow in that kind of an approach, you lose a little bit of innocence, a little bit of playfulness in your approach to life or approach to learning.
Yeah. It's like when you're a kid and you're innocent, you have that willingness to explore and experiment and you know, throw yourself off of the cliff because you don't know what's the downside yet. And then as you get older, to do those same things, you have to be so brave. And so it's like you start off innocent and it's so easy to do those scary things. And then as you get older, you have to fight that history of like the repercussions you've learned.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true.
Being so brave.
I think that's a common thread from the previous episode that we recorded. And we were, towards the last part of it, we were talking about growth mindset, which leads into your willingness to fail or make mistakes, which then leads us into a discussion of resilience. And I know that's something you've been studying and that's something you're curious about. How important is resilience? I don't know. Would you say like in realizing happiness in life?
I would say resilience is important to experience. If you want to experience a lot of things, then you have to be resilient, because imagine you experience something negative and it takes you a long time to recover and you become more fearful of repercussions, for example.
Right.
So your willingness to experience and experiment and grow becomes diminished, right? But if you're more resilient, then you can bounce back and actually use that negative experience as a developmental experience, and it will boost your subsequent positive life experiences. Because it creates like that depth, right? Like you've experienced something negative and you've overcome it and you kind of ride this high. So I would say resilience is not per se, I mean, it's for sure correlated with happiness, but I guess for me, I see it more as like an important thing I want to cultivate so that I can experience life very richly. Not necessarily very happy, but like very rich. And I want that whole spectrum of experience. And you have to be resilient, right? Because you're going to have negative experiences. But if you want to experiment a lot and you want to like, you know, be brave with your life choices or experiences, then you're going to have to accept they're not all going to work out, you know?
I'm curious, was resilience a topic that you covered in like high school or middle school or something before you dove into neuroscience?
No way.
I was curious about that because, you know, now in my life, after having lost my husband and then, you know, my mother having had this neurological disease and also having gone through a divorce with my first husband and, you know, all of these events in my life that most people would look at and call either tragic and in some cases maybe even traumatic. People look at me now and the way that I live my life and the way that I like to share and teach from what I've learned. And, you know, it's not infrequent that someone looks at me and says, wow, you're very resilient. But the first time that word was like used to my face, it caught my attention because I was like, huh, I never thought of myself as being resilient, partially because it just wasn't a word that was thrown around, as I was growing up. I think it's a relatively more recent kind of concept. But more significantly because it wasn't intentional. It's not like I set out saying, oh, I want to be resilient and I want to be strong. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Like, I really don't vibe with that platitude. My thing is, let's just take an example, because examples always land better. For example, men, let's just say relationships, okay? I see you smirking there. Let's just say relationships. Everyone wants a good, solid, loving, deeply connecting relationship. Well, what if you think you had one? What if you thought you had one that didn't turn out the way you thought or had hoped, and you're deeply betrayed and deeply hurt, okay? As was the case with my first husband. And say, you're coming out of the divorce, you have this son, and, you're trying to get your new job set up and your company set up and everything, and life is hard.
Yeah.
Now, it never crossed my mind to be like, well, I should be strong, I should be resilient, or can I be resilient? That never crossed my mind.
To repurpose that experience.
What did cross my mind was, am I ever going to love again? Yes or no? Now, as you said before, the wounded part of me would have been the fearful part of me, would have said, never again. Never risk such pain again. Now, and many people do listen to that voice, right? But I thought and I was very aware of that voice of that fear in my heart. But I could foresee that if I listened to that voice, the rest of my life would be boring as fuck.
Yeah.
It would be sad, right? And so I thought, what are my choices here?
Yeah.
I could either go with this, option A, just roll over and die and just give up love for the rest of my life, or option B, take on the risk, brush yourself off, give it another go, and see, is there anything else, or what else, like, how can I change? How can, like, the growth mindset, as you would call it. I didn't have the language for it then, but I did think to myself, how can I change? How can I think differently? How can I approach life and relationship differently, that I would lean into trust again after such a difficult betrayal? Because you can't just, throw your heart away, right? It's too precious. You're going to want to, inch into that. Now, I'm going to fast forward just to kind of stick with the thread here. But so it took me kind of 5 years, I think, to really get back on my horse, if you want to put it that way. But I thought, well, no, I don't want to live the rest of my life, without giving myself another chance for love. And when I decided that I would begin to open my heart again was when I met my second husband. Well, the man who eventually became my second husband. I had this phenomenally beautiful, connecting, healing relationship with him. And in about 2.5 years, less than 3 years of us just melding and merging our lives together and welcoming our second son, he was involved in a traffic accident and he died. He was instantly killed. And you can imagine, obviously, the kind of grief and pain my heart went through. And so that grief and that kind of, I cocooned for a full 2 years. So that's another story. But beyond the cocooning and beyond the grief and beyond the healing, and today it's been 6+ years, okay, 7 since he's passed. And if you were to ask me, Mae, and I guess for the listeners, might as well expose it, I haven't had a boyfriend since, okay? But if you were to ask me, Mae, will you ever love
Yeah.
again? Heck yeah, of course I will. Like, why would I?
I wasn't sure.
You weren't sure?
No, I didn't know what you would say.
Of course I will. And that's, I want to tell you that, but I want to scream that from the top of the mountains and let everyone know.
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to open.
Because what's the alternative?
Yeah. Well, because here's the thing. Bottom line, the alternative always sucks.
Yeah, it sucks.
Right? So that's what I mean when I say I never think of myself as being resilient or choosing resilience or like, I don't know, working out the gym and building my resilience. No, I just think to myself, what's the alternative? That sucks. Yeah. So I'll go that way.
Yeah.
And I think essentially that's ended up what people look at and say, wow, she's really regenerated herself.
Yeah.
You know? But I never really thought about it that way.
Well, it's funny because like there must be some definition of resilience somewhere in there because it is a, hotly debated topic academically. What is the definition? But you could say the ability to choose, the non-alternative is a form of resilience because some people get stuck there.
True.
Or it wallows them or it just overwhelms them. I love that option A or option B thing because I think like that all the time. It's like, okay, you're in a shitty situation and what are you going to do? Because, one option just sucks and it obviously sucks.
Yeah, it always
obviously sucks. It's like, why would you put any energy into that? And then obviously you want to put all your energy into the other one, but you get sucked in every now and then. But I like that question thing. It's just, I don't know, I guess what I think is like for people listening, so many people will think that doesn't work with me or, well, Mae must just have that resilience gene or whatever, which doesn't exist, but she must have that and therefore she's able to make that switch because when something bad happens to me, I can't make that switch. It's so overwhelming. And it's such a annoying topic for me to talk about because everyone's experience is so different. And I guess it's just good enough that it works for us.
Well, I mean, on a personal level, yeah, it's good enough that you found a way that works for you and I found a way that works for me. But I do, like in my work as a writer and as a teacher, I do try to make these, if there are little hints and little keys that might be useful for other people, I want to share it with the whole wide world and make it available, in schools, make it available at home, like make it available so that it's there when people need it, that it's in reach.
Yeah.
And so as we're talking, I'm thinking to myself, like, so it's one thing to look at one option and be like, well, that option sucks, so I'm not going for that one. But it's not to say that this other option, it's not to say that for me to open myself to love again would be easy or without fear.
Of course.
That's the big one. Of course, I'm going to be scared as shit.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And so, but here's the way my mind now works. And I think I've taken years, if not decades, to cultivate the way that my mind thinks now this way. The way my mind thinks now is, well, since it's undeniable that I am afraid, given my history, okay, I've lost my husband and experienced a divorce. Since that's undeniable, how or what can I do to make my step-by-step, baby step progress a little bit less scary or a little bit softer when and if I should fall?
Yeah.
So now it's like the central line hasn't changed, right? The risk is there and the fear is there. But now I'm like, I'm going to jump on that trapeze again. Let's make sure there's a safety net.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that to me are my friends. I'm financially secure. Or even like financially secure given like I've done my best. So maybe no one, or I'm not like, I can't say that I'm super secure, but you know what I do know is that I know I will show up. So if I don't know, I lose everything tomorrow and I go bankrupt or something, I know that I'll show up with all of my talents, with all of my mental capacity, and with all of my heart available. And I know how to pitch in the work day by day by day by day and build it again. And that's where I ultimately have trust in myself because I built it, right? And I think that's where this trust in myself, I didn't have that. I didn't have that as a 20-year-old. I didn't even have it as, I don't know, a 29-year-old. And it's been something that's been incrementally building only because turn by turn, step by step, I'm choosing to show up for myself.
You know what would be a guaranteed way you could end up, you know, being 40 years old and not having any trust in yourself? It would be if you didn't, if you went from, let's say, your first divorce, and let's just say it happened, you're at 20 years old, 20 to 40, you didn't let yourself learn from it and like go through that other path, which is hard. And you played the safe but shitty route, you'll get to like 40 and be like, well, I don't have any more trust in myself than I did at 20 because I have no evidence. And so I guess that definition, or how I like to think about resilience in my life, is that whole thing of like, I want to have that appropriate balance of safety net and like, how high am I going to jump from? And gradually grow and grow and grow it, using experiences as a way to stress and progress my resilience.
And life
then,
will do that for you.
Exactly. And then you could look back and be like, oh, I've gone through this and this and this. Like, you want that history, because it would suck to go through something awful and be like, man, looking back, I've never gone through anything really. Like, that's terrifying. Way more terrifying than, you know, the baby steps you could take along the way, right?
That's why, you know, I'm in my 40s now. And when people ask me like, you know, how do you feel about aging, or do you feel, you know, afraid, or I don't know, something uncomfortable or whatever, I don't. I'm like not only wholly at peace about it, but I appreciate it. And that's because I know I'm learning, right? I know that whatever life experience is that I'm aging in a very rich way, to borrow your word. And I love that about life. I think it's such a beautiful thing.
But you have to pay attention. Otherwise, you don't get that experience.
So I suppose what we're kind of like, you know, beating around the bush about is that it's an ability and a willingness to pay attention, right? And be present. Be present for your life and what's occurring in your life. And it's a showing up for yourself that equals a showing up for your own life. So just in case, like, I don't know, maybe one or some of the listeners are like, wait, but I'm 30, or wait, but I'm 40, or however it is, it's never, ever, never, never, ever too late. With Kizuki, with the next realization, you take it when it comes, and you appreciate it, you integrate it, and you take your next actionable step, and you open yourself to the next learning.
Yeah, and even if you're 80 and then you have this Kizuki, you could think, okay, what's the alternative? Am I going to continue down this path of learning? Or, oh, I'm a bit too late to start, so I'll just stop. Like, you know, that question is just so good all the time. It's like, what is your alternative here when you have anything you have to do?
So let me ask you to kind of wrap up here. Well, I know you're going through a lot in your life. Not necessarily, you know, you're not being swallowed whole from any of it, which I highly respect you for. But you're not exactly in a place where, you know, like one route would really suck and then there's a clear alternative, or maybe there is, but I feel like you are just kind of sussing out what your options are and learning to navigate and to carve out your own balance. I want to hone in on that and kind of tune into where you're at in your life. And as we begin this new year, 2025, what are the qualities and the elements or the essences that you would like to call forth more as the year progresses?
Yeah, it's a good point about, there's no clear option A or option B path, and it's this ambiguous space, which is kind of what makes it harder, perhaps. And I guess in these moments where you have to make decisions, and it's especially ambiguous, no one else could really tell you what you should do because they don't have the same view as you of the situation, that is, and the people involved. How do I put this? I'm very interested in developing my thinking or myself into the type of person that can make good decisions. I don't want to copy other people's good decisions. I want to be able to think on my own. And so the way you look at it is different, right? If you're copying decisions, then you're going to look at people that are where you want to be and copy their decisions. But that has such a pitfall of, well, their life is going to be so different to you. They themselves are going to be so different to you. The times have changed, etc. Like, you just can't really do that. But it would serve you to be able to think for yourself, right? And so I guess a big focus for me, mostly from this year, and definitely like a trait that I want to cultivate more, is to get really good at listening to myself and use a lot more of like my intuitive power, I suppose. And be better at expressing that desire, or I like to call it like imposing your will on the world or on your life. Like, so step one is listening to yourself. So you identify I want to identify very accurately and correctly how I really feel about something. And then step two is be good at imposing that will on the world, because those are totally different skill sets, right? Like, one is listening and one is doing. And the doing has all sorts of problems. Like, you're going to have to set clear boundaries with yourself and with people. And that requires discipline or bravery when it's talking about other people. So those are like the two main qualities. And then I think if I do that, it will just set me up to learn a lot, because I'm listening to myself, doing it, and I'm doing something that I know I want to do. So when it goes a certain way, I know like there's a learning there, because if it doesn't go how I thought, I know exactly how I felt about it and I could learn from it. But if I take someone else's advice, I can't really learn from it because I don't know, what they meant. And
and there's a huge essence there that you're tapping at, is self-responsibility. It's also, maybe it's self-reliability too. You're being accountable. You're being accountable unto yourself. And I think that's a huge way to not just connect with yourself, but to also build this self-trust that we've been talking about.
Exactly.
I love that so much, and I think it could really benefit the listeners too. Thank you so much, Jesse, for joining me. It's truly an honor. And it's crazy how you're my nephew, but I still kind of feel like your sister.
Yeah, it's really nice to get to talk to you like this also for the first time in our lives. These kinds of conversations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing yourself and your wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Learn more about me and my Kizuki journaling Mae method at my website, journaling.mae-y.com/en, or find me on Instagram at MaeYoshikawa.